Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the ICG's Digital Academy webinar series. I'm Sally Alsop, the committee member responsible for our webinar programme. So today we're delighted to welcome our speaker, William Landell-Mills, founder of Amaranth Insight. William started Amaranth in 2017 as a practice that combines semiotics with international qualitative research, mainly focused on brand strategy and design development. Prior to that, William worked at both multinational research agencies and boutiques and was responsible for evolving a number of new methodologies. William has presented papers on semiotics at the Global SMR Conference, the MRS and SemioFest in Mexico. He has published work, he has been published in AdMap, Marketing Week, and most recently in WARC. He won an Atticus for his work on metaphors in marketing. During today's webinar, William will be using a recent semiotic case study of his kids, films, and hygiene to discuss semiotics and its relationship with qual, kids, films, hygiene, moving through space, and a wider point about brand as narrative. As usual, we'll end with a Q&A session when it'll be your opportunity to get involved. So if you have anything to add to the discussion or you wish to ask a question of your own, then please either type your question in the chat box or turn on your webcam and raise your hand at the end when we open up to the audience. So we don't have a sponsor this morning, but here are our future events. Don't forget that we're able to offer great value sponsorship opportunities with each of our webinars and online events. All you have to do is to contact Lucy if you would like to know more. So now I will hand over to our speaker today, William Landell-Mills.
Hello, everyone. I think I know most of you. Most of things. So hello, hi Graham. Hi. Right. So let me. So what do I do? Share screen. All right. Share screen. And so.
That's great. If you could just put it on.
Can you see that now?
Wonderful. Thanks very much. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. So Sally asked me if I'll be willing to do a talk on semiotics. So this is a kind of something. It was said recent in the headline. It's not. It depends what you define by recent. It's not very recent. But I think it's a good explainer on semiotics and an example of I think what it brings. So and I also got permission to use it, so that makes it helpful. So oh, what have I done there? Why is that not? I don't know what's happening here. I have presented on Zoom before, so you're wondering, but I don't know when I page down, I'm just being booted.
I think you might be at the end.
Yes. Could you go?
No, I'm not.
What if you click on the second slide? What happens then?
Second slide.
Oh, I can see semiotics theory and practice now. Is that your second one?
That's the first one.
Yeah.
Okay, it seems to be working. All right. So yeah, okay. So what I'm going to be talking about is the relationship with qual. I'm going to go through a case study of where we looked at kids' films and hygiene and brought them together. And then there's a kind of more of a philosophical point about what semiotic spaces mean and kind of how they connect to narrative. And then there's a kind of wider point about brands more generally as narratives, which I found I thought has been very useful to me personally as kind of idea. So I mean, it just didn't. Most of you know me already. So, but I started off with working with David Riley Smith McClay. Like I don't know, Basher, you worked there as well, didn't you? You know, with a kind of quite a free ranging approach to learning qual on the job, really. And then worked at some big agencies, like Ipsos and TNS, where they're there are many failings, but one thing they do very well is they take big ideas seriously because they try to monetize them. And I was responsible for developing qual methodology at TNS, and I got exposed to semiotics. And then I did this big study with a guy on the ideal man, and I got very addicted. I thought it was very, very interesting, and it was giving me kind of insights that I didn't feel you could get from talking to people. And then I left, and I worked. I actually, this is the lady on the left is Lucia Laurent Neva, who's a brilliant semiotician, and she very generous. I had some projects and I commissioned her. But she talked me through how to do them basically, and that was extremely useful. And she was lovely, and kind of very much gave me the confidence to kind of do it, very, with a degree of confidence. And I've got this little motif in the middle because I feel my insight on semiotics and qual is that it's this Janus face thing. It's two sides of the same coin. And at one level, what I mean by that, and so the image on the left here is a city that cunningly looks a bit like a brain, and the thing on the right is the brain. So the tradition of qual research is, it came from originally psychoanalysis, and Viennese psychoanalysts went to America, had to make money. Ernest Dichter, was doing psychoanalysis of brands in the 50s. That then kind of filtered through into Britain. But the tradition of qual is to look at, is psychoanalysis and looking into people's minds and psyche and trying to figure out. So it's going into the mind. Whereas semiotics has a completely different tradition. It comes from linguistics and philosophy and trying to understand how meaning is created in society. And so it looks at evidence in society of what's going on, whereas qual looks at people and what they say and think as evidence of what's going on. And so there's a kind of micro versus a macro view to this. And so, and of course, there are lots of interconnections between them, hence the puzzle, a metaphor there as well, because they interlink hugely. But I think, and to me, one of the fundamental differences is when you're talking to consumers doing qual, consumers post-rationalize. They kind of are put on the spot and they can invent stuff. And that's why we use projective techniques to get at them bigger patterns of understanding that are going on. Whereas when you're analyzing a pack of Kellogg cornflakes, it can't lie to you. Now, its messages and its stuff, its meaning might be is veiled and is difficult to extract, but it is there. And I feel you get a sense of objectivity out of semiotics because you have these, if you like, archaeological facts. You have these messages that have been successful in society over donkey's years, that have worked that have been shaped by culture and that shape culture. Whereas when you have verbatim quotes from someone in a group, that's really ephemeral and very much to do with ego defense, and you're fighting the whole time to try to find the deeper meaning within that. So that to me is kind of one of the intriguing differences between them. And the way I use qual and semiotics is that my best experience of doing semiotics and qual is that doing semiotics at the beginning of a project. So you do a category study of the meaning of gin or the meaning of hygiene or what have you, a category, and you can then plot the brands within that, look at the codes, look at the different kind of types of language they use. And typically you come up with a sort of map of the meanings, and then to use that to then help the client generate ideas. So you plot the brand, you say, looking at using this lens, what does your brand strategy mean? Maybe help with the brand strategy. You can look at all things like naming, and you can plot their brand on these maps, and therefore give advice about what new kind of imagery might work So you're very well, having done one of these studies, you're very well placed to create stimulus material because you've spent a month or 2 months kind of completely immersed in the category language. So you know the different styles of language, visual, and everything. So you're then in very well placed, or naming, naming styles. So you're then very well placed to kind of create stimulus to go and be tested and explored in focus groups or method, whatever call method you like. And so that has been the way the work has tended to flow in my experience to good effect. I know sometimes you're, a semiotician is kind of parachuted into something, but I think that tends to be less successful. I mean, semiotics to my mind is best when it's really profound and upfront, and often at that point linked with semiotic with qual. But the qual, I think, really benefits from going in when you go into the first focus groups with some stimulus material that's got a lot of thought behind it, rather than kind of having a completely blank slate. So I'd also say another, if you're kind of involved in commissioning or doing any semiotics, I mean, this is probably a general truism, but I found the most useful work has come when it's, again, a sort of two sides of the coin aspect. When you say, so I've done a lot of work on tequila, but actually things shifted a gear somewhat when the positioning the brand was looking at was a luxury positioning. So we did a semiotic analysis of luxury, and then you combine tequila and luxury, and the generalities that you have with talking about tequila are then made very specific when you have a kind of luxury lens, so you can see how luxury really applies in that category. And likewise, you're going to see here, I'm going to talk about hygiene and storytelling. And it's when you get the merger of these two kind of abstract spaces that you get real profundity. And I learned this at cost because I got commissioned to do some work on the meaning of membership. And it was for a rescue company. And I hadn't done the stuff on rescue. So you come up with these very generalized views about membership. And I always felt a bit frustrated about that because we hadn't, I mean, I was just being commissioned as a freelancer to do a thing, and I did it. But it would have been so much better if there'd been an analysis of rescue and then those had been merged together. So I would say try and get the kind of find two areas of meaning, because each of them have their lenses, and when you apply them to each other, you get the really powerful insights. So that's a sort of little background and kind of a sense of where I see semiotics and qual in broad terms. This is a case study I did a little while ago, and what had happened was there was Essity, bought loads of brands, merged them together. We worked on a campaign, developed a global kind of advertising campaign that was about a bear, a kind of monster from the forest, a bit based on where the wild things are, and a little boy in the forest who the boy was going to help the bear with hygiene requirements. And in correct development, it had all, it did lots of good things, but and so here I was going to show you the ad, but it's a bit, so I just thought here's some key images just to kind of give you a sense of the sort of the kind of creature, and the sort of they're playing, goes to the loo, boy helps, and then they kind of are very, they bond in a loving way. And the reason that we got the study was because well, it was fine in many ways, but it wasn't very entertaining, and it wasn't doing very well on hygiene. So I kind of suggested, why don't we do a study on hygiene and do some qual on ethnography, so sorry, on hygiene, and use a semiotic approach to understanding kids' stories, and then see what. So that's one of those kind of dual track things. So I had a wonderful month where I watched about 20. Usually when you do a semiotic thing, I think it's a good idea to take 20 brands, but actually because these are films, I mean, it was really, I mean, these films are fantastic to watch. But you would go through and take extensive notes, and it did take. I mean, I don't think when you're at Kantar, you wouldn't possibly be allowed to spend the amount of time necessary to do this work. But as a free person, you can do what you like. And so watch these films, made lots of notes on each of them, looking at the language and the kind of plot and the kind of things, and came up and did some head scratching and read some stuff and got to a kind of an idea of a core story that they all seem to have. Now this, well, I'm going to show you a semiotic map in a minute, but it's really important when you show those semiotic maps, I kind of treat those semiotic maps as territories of a thing, and that thing is a kind of a core idea. And I think the core idea there was within the kids' stories is the story of the child. And that key core story is this idea of a child becoming themselves through, you know, being born with a sort of high potentiality of some kind, but not protected by their parents, and then being cast out. And you see all the people who have that experience, and then they face a kind of, you know, existential challenge they have to overcome, and they do that using those innate abilities that cause them to be cast out maybe in the first place. But by doing so, they come to accept themselves. They come to accept their particularity. So this is a kind of big metaphor for the experience of being a child. You're born into the world. You have pressures put upon you, but you don't want to extinguish your identity. You have to sort of learn to work with others and express your identity within that. And that is, and then the reason people tell kids stories is because it's good for their mind and everything. So, and you can see that's the kind of core story, and that's a kind of a core thought, which for the toilet paper manufacturer had various useful points. Like they were thinking, should we have the parents in these stories or not? Well, actually, no, you shouldn't, for example. So that's sort of big. I mean, I know this is not the most, you know, it's kind of a known insight in a sense, but it's one of those things you kind of bring that to the table with a lot of evidence, and they can see the personal relevance of these big things. But then getting to the territory. So there's an underlying thought about, you know, the sort of child's development and becoming a person. But there are different ways of doing that, and this is when you this kind of significance of the semiotic map of flavors of that core story. And what you have are, so the way these maps work is through opposition. So you have the top left magical kingdom, so that's kind of Snow White, etc., with a world of chivalry, alchemy, and destiny, in contradistinction, in radical contradiction, if you like, to the world of urban reality, which is these kind of kid stories that play out in LA, modern LA, whatever, which is about domesticity, social realism, self-help, kind of psychobabble for kids, you know. And that's one axis. And then the other axis was of techno-fantasia. So Star Wars, Star Trek, whatever, Stranger Things, versus the kind of world of natural worlds. So here you can see, you know, Where the Wild Things Are, or Jungle Book, etc. And you can see there are themes within there, highlighted here. So these have codes within them, and a code is just a word for the kind of the rules of the game in this world are, you know, it's to do with, you know, natural words, it's this deep wisdom, law of nature, and you have the kind of anthropomorphism of, you know, talking trees and what kind of or not talking necessarily, more like animals who will talk to you. Then on the, both of the where the model becomes kind of strategically more helpful is you get then to realize that both these things on the left have a quality of the sacred about them. They're timeless and spiritual, and they're dealing with absolute truth. Whereas the things on the right, both secular, they're much more belief in progress, rationalist perspectives, relativistic truths, and they kind of emerged later, historic, you know, the grim story, you know, the magical kingdom had its apotheosis, like in, you know, with you know, in the 19th century, right? And then there was the age of empire, and so you had then, you know, going off to India and discovering the jungle and the Jungle Book, and then they invented spaceships, so we've also went to space, and then the sort of the urban reality is always a contemporary urban reality. So there is a kind of archaeology of storytelling here, and so in each space it reflects, you know, the norms of that age. sorry, I lost track. So in the top two have this kind of ideal quality. They're about unlimited, perfectibility, and they're out of reach. Whereas the bottom is kind of much more real and grounded and familiar. So, and so you can see, you get to this quite kind of profound sense of the different forms and meanings that are taking place in these different spaces. And what you would do, typically is then go in and sort of, find out all the codes and themes and ideas that are playing out. So in the magical kingdom, it's very much about the magic in the kingdom. So the European feudal social order and kings and queens, now princes and peasants and pastoral locations and kind of proto-science. So they haven't quite got science yet. They've got rituals and alchemy and astrology, and they've got riddles and word pattern, blah, 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 that kind of stuff. You know it because we all know it, because we're all semioticians, really, because we have to decode this stuff all the time. The urban reality one, you would do a page and you say, it's got real, it's a real place. You can actually go to these places, right? You can't go to the magical kingdom. There's this streetwise, the language full of irony, full of sarcasm, explicit psychological instructions for coping with daily life, and explicit attempt to understand other people. And there's this very sense that things are very ordinary on the surface, but there's kind of weirdness going on underneath the surface. Normal rule. Anyway, you know that one as well. Then you get the techno fantasia with all this kind of magical functionality, and the superhumans and robots enhanced by technology, and the word language, all this techno speak and walk factors, and this kind of techno fetishism with these beautiful shiny objects and etc. All of that as well. And then the contradiction to that is the natural one. Excuse me. A place that might exist. You can go to darkest Peru, right? You can so timeless laws, fixed natures, or the jungle, society of animals in a free, but in the state of nature where a civilized man is always a kind of intruder or a threat, and the magic and science don't really belong. I mean, you have, apart from talking animals, but a man is if a man is to stay there, they have to live. You have to adapt to the rules of the jungle, and it's survival of the fittest in the food chain. And there's this kind of immense danger and malevolence, and it celebrates the nobility of the animals. All these kind of things that play out in this natural world, and this wisdom and the spirit of nature. So, okay, so you find these spaces, and you can pretty easily then plot your film brands on these. And where it begins to get interesting, I feel, is that actually ain't nothing straightforward. Because if you take Harry Potter, the boy starts in his, cupboard in, what is it, Slough or somewhere, and then he gets taken off to the magical kingdom of Hogwarts. You have Avatar, which is up in space, but it's actually a natural world. It's actually the jungle. You have Star Wars, which is all about spaceships, right, and Death Stars, but actually it's chivalric. You've got swords and knights and doing all that. So that's why there are these areas. And this is the point about narratives create get their unique interest from moving through semiotic space, through having these different facets and mixing. So you take, if you ever see How to Train Your Dragon, it's a lovely film, but it's set in the magical kingdom of, but actually it's completely LA, sarcastic, witty, young boy discovering himself, grumpy drag, so it's that taking of codes in one space and putting them in another that makes something unique and interesting. And the spoiler alert is brands do this as well, and that's what the power of a lot of brands is. But another thing that I thought really was very striking is not only do the stories depend on a movement through semiotic space to have their interest and their unique qualities, the actual devices that serve that purpose have an iconic quality. So the TARDIS it is a classic example of moving literally through different spaces, through the wardrobe in what's she called, in Wonderland, Alice in Wonderland. No, the other one. the boat, boat Max going off on the sea. Someone I talked about Barbie, and in Barbie, there's that little car that goes between the two worlds of Barbie, the real world and the Barbie world, and Alice in Wonderland going down a rabbit hole. I mean, it's so prevalent. That you think in Harry Potter of the role of Paddington, King's Cross, and whatever it is, 7.5. Platform 7.5 or whatever it is, or Paddington being called the station he arrives in, right? Or Up is all about hot air balloon. I mean, it is so fundamental, and which was quite interesting for the brand we're working on, because there was this toilet, this forest toilet that was going to take on great significance. Now, just to kind of make a tangential leap here. So doing work on tequila, which I'm not really, at liberty to kind of talk about greatly, but imagine, if you will, that within the world of tequila, you have within Mexican culture an indigenous tradition, Aztec history, etc. And you have, on the other hand, Spanish, European, aristocratic culture, and both of those play out within the codes that you see in that you find within the tequila category. And so, for example, taking this 1800, it's very successful bottle. It's extremely tall, which you can't see here, but anyway. But it has this kind of monumental kind of quality. And so if you think of a pyramid, one of those Aztec pyramids, they've got a few with blood running down. That shape and that oddness of that shape is a reflection of that. Whereas the script, the way it's 1800 and the kind of Gothic script is written, is a reference to the European heritage. So there are other spaces, but that's an example of a brand that is taking codes from different semiotic spaces and merging them into one thing to make something unique, a unique narrative. And so when I think it's very useful to think about when you're decoding brands. Cleaning and hygiene in children's stories. So we've got this kind of map, and you can make some observations. So when you're in the magical kingdom, what does cleaning mean? You've got, well, cleanliness and goodness, the kind of, what's it, cleanliness next to godliness? That's the kind of the classic kind of view. And it's also very much the exclusivity, the female role in the traditional world. Whereas when you move into the natural world, which is actually where our brand was operating, the freedom of the natural is very much, it's not connected to being, that fussed about dirt, because dirt itself is not that. It's much more that kind of Unilever space of dirt is good, actually, because you're being played, which is, you can see how that starts to generate some tensions for a hygiene brand that's got a bear that's crapping in the woods as its icon. So I have to, but then there are opportunities, because when the animals get into cleaning, when the wild things, if you like, start doing their cleaning, it's really fun and really mad. And so there's lots of opportunity for entertainment there, which they could use. And I also thought, well, it's funnily enough, I was watching all these programs, and we weren't looking for poo, but there was. I mean, poo has got to the point of like being sort of, well, certainly Western societies, I think, the death rate has fallen sufficiently for us not to be totally terrified of dirt, and so poo's lost a bit of its taboo in a sense, and it can be part, although it's always male, it's usually about dark colors and shade, and men and boys kind of are allowed to play these games still, so it's not completely liberated, but it's kind of, so again, for a hygiene company, that they kind of recoiled in horror when I said you do this. They're like, no way. But no. And also another point is that if you're moving through semiotic space, if you've got a hygiene brand that is kind of it's the idea of dirt is matter out of place. So if you have a hygiene brand, even if it's a lotus thing, it kind of can look like contamination. If you've got a beautiful river and you've got even a lovely hygiene brand logo lurking there, somehow sort of a bit gross. There's a sort of tension there. So you have to manage your ideas of hygiene quite carefully. We also did some ethnography, and we got people to send in images of what cleanliness meant to them. And basically, it was all about light. I mean, one of the key things. So it's like, which is kind of connected to religious ideas, isn't it? The way, the truth, and the light, etc. Cleanliness next to godliness, but it's all light, which we also got people to take pictures of their houses, which is good fun. You could see that because in the campaign we were going into people's the story was going into people's houses, so it's quite fun. That the way that the brand had done the houses was much very disciplined and actually tidiness. Whereas in fact, there's lots of kind of playfulness, and we went and got people to show photos of their toilets, and you could see these are kind of like the amount of French loos that have got maps of the world is quite amazing. And but it's this place of wonder, and kind of like that was an opportunity. I think it's a great opportunity. And from doing all of that kind of work, we then sat down and thought about a map of hygiene, meaning of hygiene for in a similar way. And we found, okay, there's types of moral goodness, as I said, cleanliness next to godliness kind of idea. And the contrast to that is domestic order, now wash your hands, very prosaic, rules about, repetition, discipline, very grounded type thing. Another space you find for hygiene is untouched, fresh. So the pristine nature, i.e. a dew drop in the morning, is perfectly clean, right? So it's perfectly, pristine. Whereas the contrast to that is that something bathed in bleach is also, so clinical sterility, which is advanced, geometric, and intellectual, but is another form of clean. So, and you can think about it a bit more, and you say, okay, the ones on the left, there's kind of an implicit quality to the, whereas on the right is very much explicit kind of ideas of hygiene. And on the top, it's kind of very much about a mental space, and on the bottom is much more physical. Anyway, but it so happened that map of different types of clean really mapped brilliantly onto the storytelling one, which was a bit, I don't know, just synchronous. I don't know what was going on there, but you can see. So we've talked about story. We got the sci-fi top right stuff. You got the fairy tale magic, which is the magical kingdom. You've got the forest, the natural. So you could see that within the different realms, different types of hygiene should apply, right? And different rules of what hygiene meant, and we've seen the dangers of cross-contamination when you do the wrong kind of hygiene in the wrong place. You don't want to be pouring bleach into a river, right? But you do want to pour it down. So that was kind of I can't go. I'm not going to go into the ramifications of that, but there were some we also saw that actually the home can be it shouldn't just be a pristine place. You can have nature coming into and magic gives you the kind of permission to bring nature into the home. And here was a tree that was growing up through the middle of the house in Paddington that would seem to be a kind of lovely idea. And we had these scripts we were later then researching, and the ad agency was really set all these ads for loo roll, right, at night. And so it was a hide and seek. The monster was in the house and playing hide and seek, and I imagine it would be really good fun, and the creatives are thinking it's fantastic. But we know that hygiene is about light. So you can see that you have, from a brand building, you're at a kind of unconscious level, you're just totally in the wrong space here. If your brand is about hygiene and you're doing ads set at night, you can't see the dirt. There is no goodness here. There's no sanctity. There's no, so it's a sort of thing that it seems like so basic, but I think you get to this observation with some authority, and you see the ramifications of it due to the other, to the deeper analysis. We also had, they had that kind of loo that the beast, the creature, he's not a beast, he's a very lovely creature, but he would go to this loo, and given the whole importance of kind of this portal, this ability to kind of talk about different kinds of hygiene in different spaces, actually an ability to bring sort of more geometric ideas of hygiene into the natural world, into that kind of setting. It was really important as a kind of portal. And so it's set up the wonderful portal loo joke. Anyway, that's funny at the time. Anyway, so all of this stuff was they gobbled it up, and it was very much appreciated. And they did, and publicists kind of took it all on board and made some changes to the campaign, including kind of taking, having being more bathed in light, being yeah, kind of escapes me what else they did, but various other things that were kind of more contemporary and kind of more evolved, that led to a development of, across. They had some very pleasing results from their new creative that seemed to deliver against what they had wanted, and led to so there you go. That's hopefully that kind of idea of the sort of Janus-faced quality of qual and semiotics, and how they feed into each other so beautifully, but they are coming from very different perspectives, is sort of borne out there. So that's my 35 minutes, almost to the dot. So Sally, I'm sure you'll be pleased with me. But what does anyone have any questions or thoughts or?
So, right, Felicia has to start off with. Otherwise, I'll follow up with a question. Felicia, go ahead.
Yeah.
You want to stop? Sorry, you want to stop sharing your screen, and then we can see people properly. William, is that okay? Fantastic. Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Hi.
Thanks, William. That was really super interesting. Sorry to be pedantic about that. Can you just quickly recap what exactly was changed in the ad, according, following your advice?
I'd have to. They developed the character. I mean, sorry. This is a much longer deck, and there was much more. So I've given you a very telescoped view of it, and I can't really do justice to all the changes, but there were quite some substantial ones. And
some examples changed from this to that because of the semiotic.
Well, one of the most, the one about the light, the treatment of light, they moved out of the forest. So they had lots of stuff set in the forest, and they moved that, for example.
Okay. Do you feel that they couldn't have got that through focus groups alone? To what extent do you feel that, apart from giving them another understanding, do you not feel that traditional qualitative research methods would have reached that same conclusion?
They might have done. I don't know how. I suspect it would be hard for a moderator to, who might have an inkling of that kind of insight. Is a consumer ever going to say that? I don't think a consumer. So I don't know. That's a question for you guys as much as me. Kind of what respondents say. I feel it was quite a semiotic type, fairly uniquely, because it was very much about a set of, the sort of the authority with which the point was landed was done with a depth of cultural understanding and backup, rather than just be an aside that could easily be brushed off. So I think the authority it has and the significance it has probably was certainly aided by that. Yeah.
Semiotics. Yeah. Any other questions from anyone? Joe, yes, go ahead.
Yeah. Hiya. So I was just intrigued. You obviously said you picked 20 things to review, and I was just wondering, obviously, like kids' films, there's thousands of them. So how do you kind of narrow it down to, and this goes, I guess, for anything, for gin, tequila, how do you narrow it down? How do you work out what you're actually going to be reviewing for the client?
Well, I think the bit, the principle is that the big stuff, the most successful stuff, is successful because it's got the most cultural traction. So it's worked and it has informed culture, and it's been and it's resonating because of something, that it's doing something right. And so you want the big stuff. You don't want if you're doing gin, you don't want to spend tons and tons of time just looking at tiny obscure gins. You really got to nail the big ones. And why are they? I mean, we know that in reality there might be distribution, blah blah blah, to do with that and history, but those. And it's not to say don't have some interesting small ones, but if you got 20 of anything, the other thing you do is you talk about with the client. You say, well, which ones do you want me to cover? Because I mean, you've got to have that discipline, because otherwise you're boiling the ocean. You know, you have to have some sort of tram rails around the amount of time that you're going to spend on it. And I think I've also found that if you do around 20, or maybe it's a bit more, maybe it's, you know, usually maybe it's sometimes you do a bit more, but you get a big enough spectrum, because you're not looking. What you want to do is generate a map that kind of encompasses all of reality, so that if you're given any example of something, it fits in your map. And if it can't fit in your map is inadequate. It needs to expand or change. But I have tended to find that by the time you've done 20 odd of these things, whatever they are, you usually got a pretty good map. So you're not after what it's like you're doing qual groups. You stop hearing the new different thing. You said, "Oh, I heard that before, and I've heard that before," and there are only so many. So that's the logic for it, and I think it's kind of heartening in a way, that you can take a sensible sample. But it does. I mean, it's a lot of work. I mean, don't get me wrong. It is a lot of work doing it. It's not a trivial, thing. I mean, you might spend a day on each one, kind of going through, and so yeah. So you're getting a lot of richness from it. I mean, imagine going through a film, how much there is within all of that. So you're getting 20 isn't a small thing. It can be a colossal amount of data.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? So
Hi, yes, I've got a question. Hi. Thanks, that was really interesting. I just wanted to know how frequently a brand would do a deep dive into, say, a given market by, taking a semiotic lens, given that, meaning and cultural references change.
Yeah, no, not that often.
So it's not that often. Okay.
I think every 3-5 years.
Okay.
But I mean, things do change. I mean, you get, like, for example, in gin, there's an explosion of pink gin.
Yeah.
And things are changing faster. And sometimes you notice if you go back and do a study, you kind of then go, things that are quite trivial become bigger. So, and I think now in particular, because we've got these, I've done a lot of work on what I call the digital aesthetic. So the kind of the way that having a camera and people being raised through cameras and computers and seeing reality through computer screens is really, to my mind, as fundamental a change as that happened in the Renaissance, when they kind of discovered perspective, and they went from God looking down and seeing everything and everything being flat to now we've got cameras everywhere. And we're seeing everything through cameras on screens, and everything's kind of perfectly lit and airbrushed, and an AI and anything. So there are some very profound changes happening aesthetically now. So I think the pace of it is just going up.
Going up. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
anyone else?
Yes, I do.
Becca, go ahead.
Thank you. Fascinating, William, as always. Thank you for that. I'm really interested to find out a bit more about how you might apply semiotics. So if you have a client who's looking for to develop new products in a category where there are cultural changes, for example, plant-based meats or for sugar reduction. How could you sort of weave in a semiotic lens into something like that that would add great value alongside qual?
Well, I think you need to. I mean, the way semiotics works is you're looking at the broad picture. It's a methodology. It's all about the big picture. So you just have to look at the category and look at the brands that are there. And I know in something like, sometimes that can be hard, because if it's at a very, very early emergent category, it might not be, you might be scratching, you're going, how the hell do we frame this? But I think, you can usually get there, and you can get a kind of set of parameters around it. And then you can just look at the different, it's something I was saying, what the different games that people are playing. So you just unravel you focus on decode what the different players are doing, and you look for the patterns and differences between them. And I think that just, and the sort of forms of language they use, the type of imagery they use, which are all kind of subsets of what I was just saying. And once you've got that, you've got just a terribly powerful piece of knowledge on which to kind of say, well, there isn't just one truth here. You could go that way, or you could go that way, or you could go that way. And these are the types of things you can, these are the resources to hand. These are cultural resources at hand, because you can do something like that mixed with something like that. So, sorry, but I would say as I was saying at the beginning, the most kind of rewarding and most useful projects kind of come at the beginning of a process, because it provides you such strong material for making stimulus, for coming up with ideas, making collages, making, putting propositions, names. I've got involved in naming a few things, and you can do it with a sense of, okay, that's where you are, in culture, that's where you are strategically, and so this sort of language makes sense for you. So yeah, so does that answer, Rebecca? Is that I feel I'm wittering.
Yeah. No, something I can pick up with you later, but that's great. Thank you.
Anyone else got any questions for William? Okay, while people are thinking, William, have you ever come across, or have you ever used it in a B2B context? It sounds quite consumer oriented, but I'm just wondering whether there are any examples where it's been successfully used in B2B.
I'm sure there are. There's absolutely no reason why there wouldn't be. I did some work. I mean, I've done some. No, sorry. The answer to your question is no. I haven't been involved in it, but I'm sure it might. Because the rules of culture don't stop at visitors to business. I mean, there are different types of meaning, and you'll get different styles, whether more naturalistic or more formal, whatever. So yeah, I mean, it's totally possible, but I haven't seen it.
Okay. Any more questions? Make the most of William while he's here. A couple of comments that have come up in the chat box. First one, thanks, William, very thought-provoking. I had almost forgotten about semiotics, despite having used it once upon a time. Your presentation is super helpful, thanks. That was from Raka. Good question about applications in B2B, considering that B2B world is assumed to be all rational, although decision-making is as emotional as B2C. Okay, that's just a comment. Any other questions at all? Matt.
Hello. I was just wondering about, because that case study you had was international when you showed the kind of research at the end. I was just thinking from the point of view as you, as a British person doing the semiotics for something with international implications, how? Because presumably there will be different children's stories in that example, traditions in.
Yeah, well, it was, we did it in.
That?
Yeah, we did it in Russia and France, and I worked with someone from Russia and someone from France as well. So that's why there's some Masha and the Bear type stuff in there. So, but Yeah.
Yeah. So you
That
needed
came
local.
more into the qual, the sort of the qual and the work on hygiene than the storytelling, because I think the storytelling had sort of archetypal structures
Yeah.
and then I just shared it with them and said, does that make sense from your, so they could kind of comment on it, rather than I didn't commission them to do the semiotic work. I commissioned them to do the more the ethnography and stuff. But generally, when I'm working, so I do a lot of work in Mexico, and there's a certain amount of stuff you can do yourself, but you do then just work with local people. It's just like qual, really. Often they do qual as well, and that's good as well, because you can continue. You can continue. You can work on kind of continual programs.
So we have another question. Sorry, did that answer your question, Matt?
It did, absolutely.
Yeah. We have another question that's come through from Caroline, who's unfortunately got some building noise in the background. So she's put a question in the chat. Just wondering about the impact of AI. Can it help source material or identify themes, or is that a red herring?
Well, I'm not the person to ask. I don't know. I'm very kind of hands-on. I kind of, when I do groups, I read the transcript and I take notes by hand, and I just do a grid and stuff like that. So I'm a Luddite there.
Okay.
No, I think someone's written there something that they do. They use software.
Yeah, sometimes I use semiotics combined with how do I pronounce this? Lexicographical software tools such as Iramutech. William, what do you think about this combination? Thanks. That's from Stefania.
Sorry, I have no idea. I don't know. I'm not very up on that. But I find the existing kind of just process of looking at stuff works incredibly well and is incredibly rich, and it's fun as well. I find it interesting. So I wouldn't want a machine to do it for me, really.
Stefania, I don't know if you want to come on screen and tell us a little bit about your lexicographical software, Iramutech.
Okay, let me start my webcam. Okay, sorry. Hi, William. Hi, everyone. Yes, I use this. Iramutech is a French software developed by the one university in France. It's really helpful because it helps you develop new hypotheses. So I wondered if you, William, have ever used this kind of combination between semiotics and you can also use TLab. I prefer Iramute, but yes, it just was wondering about that.
I haven't.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Your presentation was really, really interesting. I wonder if I can have a copy of your presentation, because I want to I don't know if you can share your presentation with us, or ICG will do that.
Yeah.
We can do it if you're able to share the slides, William. We can send that out with the link to the
okay, great. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so unless there are any more questions, probably it's time to wrap up. No last minute questions. So thank you very much, William. That was an incredibly visual presentation. Oh, Maria's just raised. No, is that a clap or raising your hand, Maria? I think it's a clap. Yes, it was a very interesting presentation. Thank you very much indeed for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks very much, guys. Nice to see you all.
Thank you to everyone for logging in today. Do come and join us for one of our future webinars, and have a wonderful afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.